Perhaps we now have the link between vaccination and autism. Professor revealed video. It is a bullshit. But I'm going to show you how it's bullshit. Chris Exley writes this article, and this article is about a piece of science, a piece of a research paper, and it was written by, Chris Exley. Well, there's no conflict of interest in reporting it there, is it?
Yeah, Jeff, that's not a wildly outrageous thing. Scientists and researchers will write articles citing and supporting their research. It happens all the time. It's not unusual. Okay?
Aluminum crosses the membrane that separates the brain from blood. The metal accumulates in cells that maintain a constant internal environment. Autism sufferers may have genetic changes that cause them to hold aluminum. Disgraced doctor Andrew Wakefield linked autism to the MMR vaccine in 1995. His views are widely discredited, but the WHO says vaccine fears may put many off. Okay, well, before we get into the evidence of why this whole thing is completely bullshit, let's address these main key salient points.
Why you gotta be a douche and squeeze the word salient in there? Why can't you just leave it at key, Jeff? Douche.
Number one, membrane crosses the blood-brain barrier. It's not impossible, but there's a reason that there's a blood-brain barrier. It's a barrier. It isolates and keeps things separate. That statement in and of itself is so reductivist, I can't even fucking wrap my head around it. It makes no fucking sense whatsoever.
Dude, that's the whole point. The whole point is that aluminum can cross through this barrier. If it was impossible and it couldn't, there wouldn't be a problem. There would be no aluminum found in any brains anywhere ever.
It'd be like saying people get rare tropical diseases. What, like all the time? Or rarely? Is there maybe they shouldn't go to the tropical areas without taking proper precautions before they... No? You're not going to mention none of that? It's just that it just happened. Oh, okay. Very fucking helpful.
Oh, my God. That analogy was so stupid. I'm at a loss for words.
Now, this next one is a fucking doozy. Oh my God. Autism sufferers may have a genetic predisposition to hold aluminum. Where do you get that from? In what?
Okay, Jeff. The reason he uses the word may is because it might be. He doesn't actually have that evidence. That's why he says may. And what he's really doing is just trying to offer a possible explanation for the off-the-charts levels of aluminum in these brains. And he's saying once they develop the autism, a possible genetic change happened that now predisposes them to hang on to the aluminum in their systems.
Okay,
right?
So what did they do? Well, they received brain tissue samples from people who had autism. And from this, they then used two different techniques in which to test for aluminum. So what they did with these brain samples was 5 of them. They got 5, and then they analyzed them using transversely heated atomic absorption spectroscopy. And I'll explain that in a minute. They also received 10 other brains, and they studied them using a certain staining method. These were subjected to staining with the fluorescent probe LumaGallium, which is purported to be a selective stain for aluminum in cells, and was first used to localize aluminum in plant roots. But you see, it's sold by a biotechnology company, and it's used not just for aluminum, but also aluminum, gallium, and other metals as well.
Yeah, aluminum, gallium, and other metals as well. And so your point is what? It's got multi-purpose use? I don't understand your point here. How does that somehow discredit how does it discredit that?
They studied these 15 brains, all of them have autism. At no point during this study did they have a control group. So you have only 15, which is an insanely small sample size, and you have nothing to compare it.
We don't need a control group of normal brains, Jeff, because we already know how much aluminum a normal brain should have, or at least we have a general idea. And as you say, brains are a precious resource, so we don't need to be wasting brains.
See, a lot of this comes down to methodology and how scientists have to craft their experiments. Now, in this, what they were doing was they were taking select regions in different lobes of the brain, because the brain is made up of various different lobes, and then they would measure them. But they would take that sample, each sample, and they would measure it 3 times to get basically their measurement and try to understand what this all meant. It sounds good, right? Well, not really how they did it. Take, for instance, this one. In one of the samples, they measured, and this is, keep in mind, this is the same exact biological sample. They measure it, and they get 2.44 micrograms, 1.66 micrograms, and 22.11 micrograms. Well, that's not all 3 very similar. One of these things doesn't quite look like the other. Okay, all right, so they measure the same biological sample. They get 2 kind of similar ones, and then 1 really, really big one. So what do they do with this information? What would be the safest way to really present this intellectually honestly? Well, okay, all right, so they measure the same biological.
Yeah, well, whatever, Jeff. You hate the way they average the giant number with the smaller numbers. But even if you took all the big numbers that they got for each section of the brain and you freaking slashed them by 2/3 and then averaged it, you would still get an off-the-charts amount of aluminum.